We're going to be looking at a story there from the Civil War of Israel. The tribes of Israel aren't getting along, and they're going to have a little bit of the Civil War. We're going to read that story. We're going to read through that story today of the Civil War. But before we get into that, I just want to share the context of what's happening around where we're at in the Bible with Judges 20. And so we're picking up the story, the Israelites, talked about Samson a while back, so we kind of have that set. But this is the tribes of Israel have begun coming into the promised land. They've gone through the wilderness, they've left Egypt, they've traveled, they've been in the wilderness for 40 years, and God is letting them into the promised land. Moses has passed away, Joshua has become their leader. It's unclear. I would say sure that at this time, in the back end of Judges, Joshua has passed away by now. But this is kind of the period after Joshua, when they don't really have a leader, and God gives them these judges to deliver them and to save them from prosecution. Because as they come into the promised land, they continuously get persecuted, they continuously get taken into exile, or they continuously have the Philistines who are putting pressure on them. And so God continues to deliver them through these people called judges. And so we talked about some of those with Samson. And so that's kind of where we're at. They are trying to take over the promised land. They're trying to find their space in the promised land. And if you remember from Judges, for Samson, I shared the mentality. It's the closing line of the whole book of Judges, and it's probably said about 5 times throughout the whole book. But it just says that everyone, in those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did what they thought was right in their own eyes. They saw what was right in their own eyes, and that's what they did. They did as they saw fit. And so that's kind of the theme, and that's something we'll see today coming out in a few different spots, where people are just doing what they think is best, and it's usually what's best for me. And so it's a very selfish mentality we'll see through the Israelites, and that's how they led into the Civil War. And so the Civil War takes place in chapter 20, but I guess to tell us how we got to this point, I think that's kind of important backstory as well. We're at this point in the Civil War because there's a man who was a Levite, and this is all in chapter 16, but I'm just going to summarize it. There's a man who was a Levite, and if you don't recall, a Levite is somebody who's going to help out in the temple later on. They help out in the tabernacle. They're a religious leader. They have a role. In the story of the Good Samaritan, it was a priest and a Levite, right? And so the Levite has a role within the religion of Israel. And so this Levite, he has a concubine. And we're told that him and his concubine and his servants are traveling, and they are looking for a city to stay in. And they come to this city, I believe it's the city of Jebusite, so it's Jebus is the city of Jebusites, and these are not descendants of Abraham. And so when they go through, the servant says, why don't we just stay here? We'll find someone to stay with here. And the Levite says, no, we won't stay here because these are not the descendants of Abraham. These are not the Israelites. These are not the ones who are taking over the promised land, which is probably wise because the Israelites are coming in and driving all these people out. So why would you stay with who is becoming the enemy? So they don't stay there, and they continue on till they get to a town of Gibeah. And Gibeah is a town of Israelites. These are descendants of Benjamin, and so they are Benjamites. And they decide, let's stay here at Benjamin. We'll find somewhere to stay here. And so they're in the town square, and somebody invites them to their home and says, why don't you come to my house and stay? I see you're a fellow Israelite. You stay in my house. I'll take care of you this evening. So the Levite, his concubine, and his servant, or servants, however many he had, stay at the house of this man. And they stay there. And then we see this scene very similar to the story of Sodom from Genesis, where all of a sudden they're staying there, and then men from the city come and they start pounding on the door. They start knocking on the door, and they ask for the men to come outside. They tell the guy who's a native there, the Gibeah, the Benjamite, he says, send out your guests so we can get to know them, so we can have our way with them, so we can seek pleasure with them, right? And it's the same thing that's happening in Sodom, right? It's a gang activity, assault, right, of a certain kind. And so that's what's happening. That's what they're wanting to do because they wanted to do what they thought was right in their own eyes. The men of Benjamin, or the men of the city of Gibeah, they want to do what's right in their own eyes. And the Levite, and I don't have any good explanation, I'll give you my own explanation I have. The Levite and the Benjamite, whose house they're staying in, instead of them taking care of this, what they do is they send out the Levite's concubine. They send her out, and they offer up the gentleman's daughter as well. They send out the concubine. And that is where the concubine then is taken advantage of all night. She's assaulted, molested, and she's left for dead on the doorstep the next morning. And the only explanation I have for why somebody would do something so mind-boggling to all of us is because they did what was right in their own eyes. They knew that going out there would cause them harm, so I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to send someone else. And so they sent in this society, one who would be of lesser status is what they believe, so they sent out the females, right? And so that's what's happening. Then what happens is the Levite the next morning opens the door, picks up his concubine, puts it on his donkey, takes her back home. And then we get a little bit more gruesome because the Levite just does what's right in his own eyes. He then cuts his wife or his concubine, he cuts her up into 12 pieces and sends her to the 12 tribes of Israel and says, look what the Benjamites have done to my concubine. Right, so very gruesome. But now we pick up the story in chapter 20, where the Benjamites have done this, and the Israelite people have come together to decide how to handle this. And this is the start of the civil war. This is the start of the fighting between the Israelites here. And we're going to start in chapter 20, verses 4 through 9. So the Levite, the husband of the murdered woman, said, I and my concubine came to Gibeah in Benjamin to spend the night. During the night, the men of Gibeah came after me and surrounded the house, intending to kill me. They raped my concubine, and she died. They took my concubine, cut her into pieces, and I sent one piece to each region of Israel's inheritance because they committed this lewd and outrageous act in Israel. Now all of you Israelites, speak up and tell me what you have decided to do. All the men rose up together as one, saying, none of us will go home. Not one of us will return to his house. But now this is what we'll do. To Gibeah, we'll go up against it in the order decided by casting lots. And so they decide, there's 400,000, I didn't read that verse, we'll read it in a minute. There's 400,000 men gathered, and they decide, we're going to go up against this city because this is a horrible thing they have done. We're going to go up against this city because of the horrible thing they have done. And we're going to go up against them, we're going to fight against them. That's what they decided. And I guess I want to just make sure we understand how far the Israelites are from God. They are from what the path was destined for. Because we read the horrific thing that just happened. And we read that they're going to go fight. But what we don't read is, and we just glaze over here because it's so minor compared to what's happening. But the religious leader gets up before this assembly and says, hey, my mistress, who I was sleeping with, who I was having an affair with, my mistress would have this happen to her. Right? And so the ridiculousness here is just so far out there because the Israelites have lost their path. A man who is to be the leader of the tribe, a man who is to be the leader of the nation in religious terms, is living like those around him. He's living like the others who are taking multiple wives, who are doing things that God does not desire them to do, living outside of the way they should. And so he asks the Israelites what they will do. What is your judgment? What do you decide we should do? And they decide, we're going to go up, we're going to go into battle against these guys. We're going to go up there, as verse 9 says, we'll go up against it in an order decided by casting lot. Going against this town. Moving on down chapter 20, verses 17 and 18. Israel, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 swordsmen, all of them fit for battle. The Israelites went up to Bethel and inquired of God. They said, who of us is to go up first to fight against the Benjamites? The Lord replied, Judah shall go first. And so they come, and they're at what happened between these two sayings here is they go to the town, they go to the town of Gibeah, and they ask the Benjamites, turn over those who have done this atrocious thing. Give them to us so we can give them the punishment that they think is right in their eyes. Right? That's what they want to do. They want to give them what they deserve, and a punishment that I think we would all support as well. But they want to do this. They want to take care of it themselves. And the Benjamites don't do it. They say, no, we're not going to turn on our fellow men. And so the tribes of Israel, 400,000, decide they're going to have to go to battle with the tribe of Benjamin. And I think Benjamin has maybe 23,000 or something like that, 26,000 soldiers to the 400,000 soldiers. So very outnumbered. And the 400,000 Israelites, they come before God and they ask God, who should go up first? And God tells them that Judah should go up first. And so the next day they go out to battle, or maybe it's that day even, it's not clear, but they go out and battle. And it's there that 22,000 of the Israelites are killed in the battle. Even though they outnumbered the Benjamites, and they had 400,000, and the Benjamites only had around 26,000, so 22,000 of the Israelites are killed in the battle. They were struck down. If we continue on and we read there in chapter 20, verse 22 and 23, but the Israelites encouraged one another again, took up their positions. where they had stationed themselves the first day. The Israelites went up and wept before the Lord until evening. And they inquired of the Lord. They said, shall we go up again to fight against the Benjamites, our fellow Israelites? The Lord answered, go up against them. And so they go up against them a second day. He tells them to go back. Yes, go back. Go fight again. They come to God. They've set up their battle grounds. They come to God and say, should we go back and fight them? Should we go fight the Benjamites? They're our fellow Israelites. They're our brothers. They're fellow descendants of Abraham. Should we go fight them? And God says, yes, go back and fight them. And it's that day that they go back, now with not 400,000, now they have 378,000 compared to the 26,000 army. And we're told that day they had 18,000 men who were killed in the battle. 2 days and they lose 40,000 men when they outnumbered the troops they were fighting extremely large, extreme large difference. And they come to God and ask him what to do. 2 times they came to God. 2 times they have followed God's guidance. 2 times they have been absolutely destroyed in the battle. And this leads me to the question, you haven't gotten there yet, but why? Why, if they asked God what to do, and they did what God told them to do, why are they losing in the battle? Why is God sending them into battle? Why is God telling them to send Judah first? Why is God saying go back to battle the second day? And yet they are still losing the battle. Maybe sometimes you have this question in mind, but why? Why did it happen that way? Why did this happen? I go to church. I do what God has called me to do. I prayed about this decision I was going to make. I prayed about this job. I asked God if I should apply for it. I'm pretty sure he told me yes, and then I didn't get the job. Why did I not get it? I'm pretty sure I prayed really hard with my children, and they did not get the scholarships. I'm pretty sure that they've been the athlete I wanted them to be, even though that's what I prayed for. Why did it go this way? Why did this happen? Why did the situation come out this way? If I've asked God, that's what the Israelites just went through. They ask God. God gives an answer. They do what God says. Just bites right on the rear end. And I don't know why your situation has worked out the way it has. I won't lie. I don't have the universal answer we can slap on every situation. I wish I did, because that might make sense, but I don't. But what I can tell you is some reasons why I think the Israelites have the situation they were in. That's what I want to do. I want to look at the Bible and see what they have had. And so that's what we're going to do, is look at the situation. And maybe it will apply to your situation, and maybe it won't. But the first thing I want to do is I want to look back just a little bit. If we read, just stay there in Judges with me, I guess. But if we were to read prior to this situation, how the Israelites go into battle, and how Israelites lead their nation. If we think about them leaving Egypt, and how they were guided through the wilderness, it was by a pillar of fire at night and a cloud during the day that represented God, right? They followed God. If we think about how they go into battle whenever they come into the promised land, there's 2 ways they do it. One is God has already told them that you go into the promised land and drive these nations out. And so we see God saying, do this, and they follow God's instructions. And then the other way is they take the Ark of the Covenant, and the Ark of the Covenant, just imagine some type of, godly, holy looking box that has the 10 Commandment tablets in there and some other symbolic things, Israelite history. And it represents Christ, or it represents God to the Jewish people. It represents the presence of God. And what they do, the other way they go into battle is they follow the Ark of the Covenant. Moses or Joshua will say, wait until you see the Ark of the Covenant, and then follow it into battle. The priest would carry it, the tribe of Levi would carry it, they would carry that, and they would go into battle, and they would follow God into battle. And so that's how they go into battle, is not by their own decision, but they go into battle by asking God, and they go into battle by following God. Now, I think they're on a righteous road here, because they are right in what they're doing. Because the wrongs have been very wrong. And I think they probably are doing what God would have asked them to do. But if we look back at verse 7 and 8. Now, all you Israelites, speak up to me, is what the Levite says. Speak up to me. What have you decided to do? All the men rose up together as one, saying, none of us will go home, not one of us will return to his house. They get into this we mentality. This is what we are going to do. Here is what we are going to do. Levi said, Levi, he's supposed to be the religious leader. We never see the Levite in this story inquire of what God desires. Inquire of what God asks for. Then he goes to his fellow man, his fellow Levites, and he says, what do you guys want to do? They get into this we mentality. They do not consult God. They do not get the Ark of the Covenant to lead them. They state they're going to go up against Benjamin. This is what what we will do. We're going to go up against Benjamin because this is what is right in their eyes. They're doing what's right in their own eyes. It's not until verse 18 that we see them inquire of God. And even when they do inquire of God in verse 18, they went up to Bethel and inquired of God. And they said, who of us is to go up first to fight against the Benjamites? The Lord replied, Judah should go first. Right? This is the first day of battle where they lose 22,000 men. When they come to God, finally ask God for his guidance and his advice, they don't come to God and say, what is your plan? What should we do, God? They come to God and say, we're going up against the Benjamites in battle. God, this is what we're doing. Who is going to go first? Who should we take, God? Who should we take first? They've already decided what their plan is. They've already made up their decision on what to do. And they want to go do this. And now that they've hit a roadblock, now that the Benjamites have said, no, we're not turning these men over to you. Now that they hit a roadblock, they come to God and say, God, how are we going to do this? And God gives them guidance. He does. He gives them the guidance of send Judah first. And they lose 22,000 men. This is sometimes us. This is sometimes how we come to God and ask God for advice. We've already made up our plans. We've already put the groundwork down. We've already decided what we're going to do. We've already started our plans. And when we hit a roadblock, we then say, well, God, why did this not happen? Because we did not consult with God maybe before we started. We did not ever even ask God if this was his desire for us. It's as if we are asking God to join in our plans, when in reality, we're not asking God to join into our plans. We're getting our lives on track with what God's plans are. And so God is not coming into our plans, but rather we are to wrap our lives in our plans around what his plans are. We are getting on board with what God has planned. And we cannot know what he has planned if we do not ask. So the Israelites go on with their plan. They lose 22,000. And so the first reason I think the Israelites don't get success in this battle is because they're not asking God what they should do. They're asking God how they should do what they want to do. The second thing comes in the next day when they ask God again. If we look at verse 23, they come back to God. They went up and wept before the Lord until evening. They were sad, they wept. And they inquired of the Lord, that we go on up again to fight against the Benjamites, our fellow Israelites. The Lord answered them, go up against them. So the second day they do come to God. And what I just told you was they don't ask God what they should do. They ask God how they should do what they want to do. Now we see God here, the Israelites here, they come and they cry before God. They're sad. Well, of course they're sad. They just lost 22,000 men in a battle that they should have just annihilated. And they're sad. And they ask God, should we go up again to fight the Benjamites? They go up again, they lose 18,000 men that next day. They lose 18,000. Have you ever asked anybody, maybe you've been asked, I guess, maybe. Have you ever had anybody ask you for your opinion on something? And they don't really want to hear your opinion. They want to hear their opinion just from your voice. If you haven't, just be married for a couple of years and you'll get to do that quite often. But that's what's happening here. The Israelites come up to God and they say, God, should we fight them? Should we go against our brothers? And in verse 23, it really does sound like they're being genuine. It does sound like they're truly asking for God's advice. But if we look at verse 22 and see what has already happened, we can see that the Israelites already have the plan made up again. But the Israelites encouraged one another. This is after they lost 22,000. They encouraged one another and again took up their possessions where they had stationed themselves the first day. They're already in battle formation. They're already in the battle lines. They're already ready for battle. They're about to go out and march against the Jebusites. And then they say, or not the Jebusites, the Gibeons, the Benjamites. And they say, wait a second, God, should we go up to battle? What do you think, God? Does this look good? Does this look like something you want? Because we're here and we're ready. And God says, go again. When we put all the work in, when we do all this work, when we have our plans already made, when we have our decision already made up of what we're going to do, and we lay all the groundwork, and then we come to God and ask him, is this what I should do? We're not asking God what he wants us to do. We're asking God to look at our work, look how good I've done, and prove what I've done. If you're like me, you're gonna hear the answer you wanna hear, right? If you're like me and I ask my wife what I wanna hear, I'm going to ignore when she says something differently, or I'm going to then spend 20 minutes convincing her of my way until she finally says, hey, yeah, you already have your mind made up, just go and do what you want, right? And that's what happens here. They've already had their mind made up. They already know what they want to do. And we do this. We get the cart before the horse. We fill out a job application for the new job, right? We fill out that job application well before we're even told by God to go look for a job. Thinking, maybe we'll explore it. I considered that a couple of times. There's a couple of jobs at the prison I've opened up, and I'm like, this seems interesting. Maybe I should try that. And thankfully, I didn't apply for one of them because I wouldn't have done a very good job, I don't think. But we've got to ask God, not look at the work we've done, God, and approve of it. But God, what is it you are asking me to do? Date a person for years before we ask God, is this someone I can raise a family with? Right? We look at housing before we decide to look at our finances and decide if we can afford that home. We're not asking God what we should do, but we're asking God to look at our work, what we have already done. It's this day that the Israelites go back into battle. They're hearing the answer they wanted to hear after hearing the answer approving of what they've already put work in towards. And they go into battle and they lose 18,000 men, marking 40,000 men altogether that have been lost. And I want to retract just a little bit because there's a thin line. We've got to figure out the balance between trusting in God to provide for us and also doing the work God has called us to. Right? And so if God is calling me to do something, it sounds like maybe what I'm saying today is you just got to sit back and let God take care of it all, and you don't have to worry on anything. And that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is we've got to come to God first and say, God, what is it you are calling? And then we look how God is calling us to that. And then we put the work in for that. So we don't sit back with nothing to do. Rather, we ask God for his counsel. We ask God for his advice first. Then we do it. You see, the Israelites had tried to go about it their own way. They were really just inviting God along the route with them. God, here's what I want to do. Here's what I'm going to do. You can do it with me if you want. Hop on in. I have a favorite restaurant that's only located in the southeast part of the United States. When we were coming home from Florida last week, there were 3 other adults in the car, and I was driving the last day, and I said, hey, I'm eating lunch at this restaurant in Clarksville, Tennessee. If you want to eat there, you're welcome to, or you can drop me off and go get your own food somewhere else, but that's where I'm eating. And so me and Augie got dropped off at the restaurant. They went and ate somewhere else. That's what the Israelites are doing here. God, here's what I'm doing. Do you want to get on board with this? Do you want to support this? This is my plans. Please support me. That's what the Israelites were doing. Hey, God, we're 100% ready for battle. We've already got the spears marked out. We actually took 2 steps earlier and marched a little bit, but now we want to know, God, do you want us to go into this battle? Oh, okay, great. We're going to go ahead and go. Even though God still guided them, they were not asking for his plan. They were making decisions that God should have been making. And so I don't know if God gave them guidance still as a way of punishing them. I don't know if God gave them guidance instead of just saying, nope, back up, I don't want you to do this at all. I don't know. I don't know if God was frustrated with them because they were so far. They had a religious guy coming up on the stage and saying, hey, my concubine had this happen to her, right? There should have been some gasps. There should have been some calling out of a Levite. What are you doing with a concubine? You're a Levite. How could you live this way, right? I don't know if God is just frustrated with them. That's why he did this, but God gives them advice. God gives them guidance. Proverbs 19:21 tells us, many are the plans in a man's heart, but the Lord's purpose will prevail. It's the Lord's purpose that will prevail. We can make all the plans we want, but if we are not consulting God, then it's very possible that they're just not going to happen. It's the Lord's purpose that can prevail. So we can make our plans. We can ask God to support our plans. We can ask God how we should do something. If it's not what God is actually calling us to do, it might just blow up in our face. God might guide us. God might give us direction on our plans. It might not turn out how we wanted it. Like I said, I don't know why. I don't know why your prayers have been answered the way they have. I don't know why. But I do know that now that we took a little reality check here with the Israelite story, We see why. The tribe before an army, a battle of 400,000 people, verse 26 was losing. Well, why your situation? But the Israelites have had their answer this way for these reasons. It's because rather than seeking God's advice and asking God what they should do, they were letting God know what they were going to do. They wanted to know if God wanted to come alongside of them, if God wanted to support them at all, if God had any tips for them. And so I encourage you to ask God, what is his plan in all things for you? Not just in the big things, as far as a career. God, is this what you want me to do for a career? God, is this where you want me to live? Is this where you want me to raise my family? Is this who you want me to raise my family with? Not just only in the big things. God definitely cares how we do those things. But I also think that God has time and love and patience and care enough for all of us with the small things too. Maybe not as much as, is this where I should eat on my way home from Florida? But maybe is this something I should be supporting with my money? God, there's a love offering at church next week. What is it you are calling me to give? God, there's a homeless person I see once in a while on my way to work. What should I do? God, I know this family needs something. God, I know this kid at school. God, I know this, I know that. I encourage you to ask God what his big plan is for you in all things. Not just the big things, but also the small things. We should be coming to God to seek his guidance for everything in our lives. The Israelites didn't do that. The Israelites didn't do that. And their prayers were answered drastically different, tragically different than what they wanted them to be. So I ask you this week, I encourage you, will you seek the guidance of God in all things that you do this week? Would you pray with me?